Okay, so welcome to the introductory lecture to the ideation section of the YUMP Create a Business program. The objective of this particular module is that at the end, you will be able to create a full-blown business opportunity and also be able to evaluate potential business opportunities. Okay. Now, some of these words may be unfamiliar to you, but that's okay. Over time, they will become very familiar to you. It's important to understand who you are. What I mean by that, it's important to understand the skills and capabilities that you currently have. Now, as new entrepreneurs, there are lots of different things that we need to know. And you're never going to be able to master all of the skills that you need. There are just so many skills and capabilities that you need to create and run a business that it's very challenging for any one particular person to have those. That's why we have teams that come together with different sets of skills. And that's why we also bring advisors and other representatives and coaches and whatnot to help you as well. But in order for us to be successful in doing that, in order for you to be successful as an entrepreneur, you need to be honest with yourself to understand who you are and what skills you have and what skills you don't have, perhaps more importantly. It's also important for you to understand where you want to go. Where do you want to go in this process? What type of business? How many people? How big? Is it going to be a local business? Is it going to be a domestic business? Is it going to be an international global business? Now, why are we talking to you? Well, we're talking to you because we believe that we can help you in this particular process. We believe that we can help you in this particular process. So, for the next little while, throughout this lecture, we're going to be talking about the opportunity development process. And simply put, the opportunity development process is how do you come up with a potential business idea, and how do you develop that idea so that it can become potentially a business down the road. Okay. Now I'm going to try to keep these lectures relatively short. I'm timing myself, so if you hear something go off, that's what it is. How much value have you created today? It's an important question, because if you're not creating value, you're probably wasting your time and someone else's money. So everything that we think about and everything that we do should be about creating value. Now, you might ask who you're going to be creating this value for. Well, as entrepreneurs, the primary person you're creating value for is you, the owner. You're creating value for yourself. Now, the best way to do that is to create value for customers. So if we keep our eye on creating value for customers, we will also create value for ourselves, the owners of the firm. And by creating value for customers and creating value for the owners of the firm, we also create value for society. So entrepreneurship is a valuable social activity where value can be created, okay, and also distributed, okay, to new folks that perhaps haven't had this value before. Some look at things and ask why. Others look at things and ask why not. George Bernard Shaw. So, which one are you? Are you one of those people that ask why? Or are you one of those people that ask why not? And of those two people, which do you think more entrepreneurs are? The ones that ask why, or the ones that ask why not? And if you guessed why not, I would probably agree with you as well. Entrepreneurs look at the state of affairs and they say, well, why can't things be better? Why can't things be different? And that is your role, making things better. Okay. Now, this is the definition of entrepreneurship that I want you to learn. Okay. the process of coordinating resources to exploit or take advantage of opportunities that exist in the market or created by innovation in an attempt to create value. Now, you don't have to memorize this or anything like this. This is what was called an opportunity-based definition of entrepreneurship. What I want you to get out of this is that entrepreneurship is not just about starting a firm. It's not just about a small firm. It's not just about a rapidly growing firm. It can be about a small firm. It can take place in a large firm. It doesn't necessarily have to be a young firm. It can take place in an old firm. But it's a process, and it's about creating value. And you haven't heard me mention the term money yet. I've been using the term value, and value is what entrepreneurship is about. Value can be in terms of financial value of money, or it can be in some sort of other social value. So entrepreneurship can take place in for-profit businesses as well as not-for-profit businesses as well. Now, in our particular case, for the most part, we're going to be talking about for-profit entities, so we're going to be talking about creating financial or money value. But the concepts and themes that we learn are equally appropriate for both profit and non-profit businesses. Now, the venture creation process can be looked at in many different ways. Here's one way that we can look at it. The ideation process, as we talked about, is the opportunity development process. Then a planning process, where how do we plan the creation of the business, and then one of execution. An execution process is one where we take the plan and we try to make it come true. We take the plan and we try to put it into reality, so to say. And then the final is growth. How do we then make the firm grow as rapidly as we can? How do we understand the growth process in a way, and how do we manage the growth process in a way that the growth doesn't get beyond us? Because one of the secrets you'll find in entrepreneurship is that many firms fail not because they're not growing, but oftentimes because they actually grow too fast. Or let's put it this way, they grow beyond the capabilities of the managers and entrepreneurs of the firm. So we don't want that to happen. We want it to grow as fast as we can, but we want to make sure that we have the skills and capabilities to take it to the limit. Okay, so if we look at the opportunity development process, we can break that down into these 5 sort of categories. The first one is an idea kernel. We're going to talk about that in 1 second. The next is customer space. The third is the business model. The fourth is market space. A fifth that actually is involved in all of the 4 previous steps is this integration and evaluating of the opportunities. And we're going to touch upon all of those things in this module. Now, it's important to understand that this opportunity development process is one of experimenting and testing and learning and adapting. So what I mean is, it's not just one that takes place in your head. It's one that, to be successful, you need to interact with the environment. And be more specific, you need to interact with customers or potential customers. And by interacting with them, talking to them, probing them, trying to sell them things, and getting the feedback from those conversations, from those sales attempts, and then incorporating that feedback back into our activities. So the more we can get out and speak to the customer or work with the customer or interact with the customer, the more information we can learn, the better we're going to be able to create a product and service that's going to ultimately meet their needs. So this is a very interactive process. So it's what we can say, quote unquote, it's iterative and recursive, meaning there are lots of feedback loops. We take lots of 2 steps forward and 1 step back. but it's very difficult to teach a process that has many feedback loops. So we're going to teach the process in a linear fashion, meaning step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. But it's important for you to keep in mind that these processes are, some of them are parallel, some of them are are iterative and have lots of feedback loops. So keep that in mind. We're not just going from A to B to C, that we're doing all of these things at the same time, and that's part of the reason why this process of opportunity development and the process of entrepreneurship itself can be very challenging. So this is something that I want you to remember here, is that there are many inventions but far fewer innovations. And what do I mean by that? Well, an invention is something that's new and novel. Okay, something that's new and novel. An innovation is the commercialization of that invention. So just because you come up with something new, an invention, that's not an innovation. Okay? For it to become an innovation, you have to get people to use it. You have to get it out there. Because only by getting it out there do you actually create the value. Now, Sweden, for example, is a country that is amazingly good at invention. If you look at all of the international studies, you'll see that Sweden is at the top in terms of invention. But in terms of innovation, in terms of commercializing the invention, in terms of capitalizing on the invention, in terms of making money from the invention, we don't do as well. Now, that's not to say we're not good at it. We absolutely are. There are many international companies out there that come from this small little country. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we could be doing much better. And part of the reason that you're sitting there is to help us do much better, is to take those ideas that you have and get them out there. Spread them out there. Get people to benefit from them. Create value. I.e., commercialize your new and novel ideas. So when we talk about an idea kernel, what are we talking about? Well, an idea kernel is the beginning parts of the opportunity process. It's the nub of the business opportunity. It's the initial business idea, to make it simple. It's not an opportunity, it's pre-opportunity. Okay? But it's the starting point of the business opportunity. Okay? So when someone says, "Ooh, that's a good business opportunity," most of the time it's not, at least yet. It might be a good idea kernel, it might be a good starting point, but what you will learn through this ideation process and through this module in general is that the idea is just a starting point, and lots of things have to be developed and analyzed for it to become a full-fledged or full-blown business opportunity. And this idea kernel is closely related to the market need, the market problem, and the market pain. So this is a good point for us to take a quick break, and I'll be back very shortly. Okay, we're back. Opportunity recognition. Opportunity recognition is about how you discover a business idea. And opportunity recognition is sometimes called opportunity identification. So opportunity recognition and opportunity identification are often called the same things. But we're going to be a little bit more precise than that. We're going to say that opportunity recognition is made up of both opportunity identification and opportunity selection. So, in other words, there are lots of opportunities out there. When you see one, okay, you have to then select it out of among the group. So you don't recognize that there actually is an opportunity until you, one, identify it, and two, pull it out of the group. Okay, it's a minor point, but it's just one that we need to know just to be a little bit more precise, because that's selecting among a group of opportunities or potential business opportunities is a skill that you're going to have to develop over time, because there are lots of potential business opportunities out there, and how do you select among the ones that are best for you and your team at any one particular time? Preparing the mind. The brain is an amazing thing, and it has the ability to reveal basic business opportunities all of the time. However, in order for it to work properly, you have to prepare yourself and prepare your brain in order for it to work. So when I'm talking about preparing the mind for this opportunity development process, what exactly am I talking about? Well, what I'm talking about is that you need to fill your head with all sorts of material, all sorts of information and data about the target market or the group of customers that you are focusing on. Let me give you another definition here. The definition of a business opportunity is an unmet market need. An unmet market need. Okay? So what we're looking at is trying to find a group of people that have an unmet market need. And once we've identified a group of people that we want to work with, let's say women 18 to 35, or men who are over 50, or restaurants that sell pizza, whatever the group of potential customers we're interested in, we need to learn as much about them as possible. And why is that? Because what we're learning here is a problem-based approach to opportunity development. So we need to understand what sorts of needs and what sorts of problems, and ultimately what sort of pain, are these restaurants or senior men or women or whoever we've decided to target are having. So we need to read magazines that deal with that target market. We need to speak to them. We need to perhaps watch the same programs that they're watching, listen to the same music, look at the same trade magazines, go to the same fairs or conferences that they're going to. But again, because the more information that we have about the potential target market, the better we're going to be able to understand the needs that they are having and the problems that they are having. It's very simple. It is very difficult for us to create a product or a service that meets someone's needs or solves someone's problems if we don't know enough about them. It's very simple. Okay, so let's assume that we have this information, and we need to do it on a constant basis, not just one time, because things change. So, then there's an incubation period. An incubation period is just a fancy word for saying that we need to think. So we fill our heads with information related to the target market, and then we need to think. Now, what's great about the brain is that we can think in a couple of different ways. One way is that we think in the forebrain, meaning we actually decide we're going to think about it right now, and we concentrate on it. Another way is in the background. So we kind of can multi-process. If you're familiar with a computer, you can be working on your word processing in the front, but your computer is also doing something in the back. The same sort of thing. We let the brain take over. And it's my understanding that the brain working in the background is much more powerful than the brain in the foreground. So we can kick in the real high power thinking by passing this information back to the foreground. And so what the brain is trying to do is trying to take this information and trying to make sense. It's trying to make sense of nonsense. It's trying to find the patterns. It's trying to find how this information fits. And when that happens, that's when you oftentimes get the idea. Have you ever been working on a particular problem and you're really focusing on it, and you can't make any headway? And then you decide to say, forget it, I'm going to go and go for a run, go to the gym, or go take a shower. And you take your clothes off, you put on your running clothes, your running shoes and whatnot, and you're about to go out the door. And as soon as you hit the door, you get an idea. And then you're looking for a pen or a piece of paper or something that you can use to write it down. So what just happened? Well, you were focusing on it and then decided to leave it. And so when you left it, you were still thinking about it, but it moved to the back part of the brain. And it was working. And then when you started thinking about some other things in the foreground, that's when the idea came. I'm sure you've experienced that same sort of thing. So as you become much better at looking at and seeking and recognizing business opportunities, you can handle them in the same way, where you can fill your brain with information about potential target market and then just let it incubate. Just let it work, and various ideas will come out for you. Intentional versus eureka. Let's talk about that. When I say intentional, I'm talking about when you decide, I'm looking for a potential business opportunity. I'm looking for a business idea. And eureka is one that just comes to you randomly. Just comes to you randomly. So, if we're working in a business and it's our job to come up with a business opportunity, let's say I divide the room into two halves. And I take the intentional group to one room and the eureka group to another room. And I take the eureka group and I give them pens and papers and some coffee. And I say, okay, get to work. And what do? Well, they just sit there and think. What are they thinking about? I don't know, but they're waiting for lightning to strike. They're waiting for them, out of the blue, out of random, for them, wow, to just get an idea. While if we go to the intentional room, they're working a plan. They're working a step-by-step approach to identify potential business opportunities. They're looking at potential customers. They're trying to find out who their customer is, who their customer isn't, trying to look at their needs and their problems, and they're trying to prioritize those problems and deciding which problem is best for us to approach. And then they're trying to think of a solution, which is a product or service that meets those needs or solves those problems or heals that pain. That's what they're trying to do. And they're going to come up with many, many, many more ideas than the eureka room. Most of those ideas will not be good, but it's the volume of ideas that will lead to success. The volume of ideas that lead to success. They did a study, and they looked at the businesses that came out of an intentional process to create a business opportunity versus a situation of random eureka situation. Which business ideas do you think were better? Which business ideas were better? The ones that they planned or the ones that just came out of random thin air? Well, the answer is they were equally as good. Whether the idea came from a process and was intentional or from random eureka, the ideas were equally as good in terms of the business success. But the difference is, if we're doing it intentionally, we can come up with many, many, many more ideas. If we use the random method, we can't be sure if we're going to come up with an idea. So the intentional approach is a much more powerful approach. Much more powerful approach. Linus Pauling is a name that you should know. He won 2 Nobel Prizes, one in biochemistry and one in peace. And when asked How was he able to come up with so many good ideas? He said the trick is to have lots of ideas. Impossible things. There's no use trying, said Alice. One can't believe impossible things. I dare say you haven't had much practice, said the Queen. When I was your age, I always did it for half an hour a day. Why, sometimes I believed in as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. This is from Alice in Wonderland. Well, let me ask you this. How many impossible things have you thought about? Now keep this in mind, that virtually everything that exists today was impossible just up until the time it was created. Whether it be fire or the wheel or space travel or the car or computers or laptops or phones, mobile phone, everything impossible until it was created. Now this is important, because if you are trying to come up with new products and services to meet the needs of your customers or your potential customers, everyone will say to you that you need to, you should limit yourself to what's possible. Limit yourself to what's possible. The problem is this: you don't know what's possible. If you limit yourself to what you think is possible, you're going to limit yourself too much. Because while it might be impossible today, it might not be impossible tomorrow. You understand what I'm saying? What I'm saying is you need to free yourself to think about solutions to these people's problems. Don't worry about if you believe it's possible or not. Okay? People say, well, you need to think about, in terms of creativity, you need to think outside the box. And I always say, what box? Because as soon as there's a box, you've limited your thinking already. So free yourself. Focus on the solution to your customers' problems. Focus on meeting their needs. Focus on curing their pain. Okay? That's a step. We can take everything else after that. If your ship does not come in, swim out to it. What's that mean? What does that mean? It means that the process of entrepreneurship is one of proactivity. Meaning you just can't sit around and wait and hope. You need to be proactive, meaning you need to take steps to go out and meet the potential business opportunity. It's not going to come to you if you don't do anything. Or let's say it rarely will. Opportunity is missed by most people because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work. Developing business opportunities is hard work. That's why so few people actually do it. Because people don't like work. People want things that are going to be easy. But that's good for us. Because if most people aren't in the business of creating businesses, there's going to be less competition for us. If there's less competition, it's more likely that we'll succeed. More likely that our profits will be higher. Okay. A wise man makes more opportunities than he finds. What does that mean? Well, it means this, is that what we're learning here is the opportunity development process. Very few fully developed business opportunities exist in the environment at any time. And why is that? Well, for the reason that if the opportunity exists in the environment, while we're sleeping, people in India and China are up, and vice versa. So it's very likely that somebody is going to find that opportunity and exploit it. So opportunities just don't hang around. They asked Andy Grove, who's the founding chairman of Intel, that makes the computer chips. They asked him a question. They said, how are you and Intel so successful in your ability to kind of predict the future or what's going to happen next? And he said the secret of predicting the future is to create it. So it's the same thing with business opportunities. To have a business opportunity that's ready to be exploited when you're ready to exploit it, the best way to do it is create it. So in this process now of us learning how to take the idea kernel and developing it into a business opportunity is just that. There will be an opportunity because we will have created it. The opportunity is always knocking. But are you listening? Well, what does that mean? That means that there's opportunities all around us, but very few people are perceptive enough to recognize them. Not as many people out there have been trained to recognize these opportunities. You have to be able to be tuned in order to hear these opportunities. I like to consider myself, or use the metaphor of a radio or TV. And we're like the TV or the radio tuner. And most of the time, all we hear is static, white noise. But if we are able to tune ourselves in properly, what do we hear? We see TV and we hear music. It's the same thing. Once you've been trained, once you know what you're supposed to be listening for or looking at, everything else becomes clear. Because there are opportunities out there all the time, but we're just not paying the right attention. Over these weeks of this program, you're going to learn how to pay attention, learn a methodology, learn to be able to recognize these potential opportunities that everyone else is missing. Okay, let's take a quick break here, and I'll be back to you in a quick second. Okay. The opportunity frontier. What is this all about? I'll make it really simple. Is that the needs and wants that people have are sometimes difficult to express in words. And that means they are implicit, is the term, or they're latent needs or wants. When something is explicit, then you're able to express it in words. Now this is a problem because as an entrepreneur, we want to meet the needs and the problems of people. But if they can't really express them, the only thing we can create products and services around are around the ideas that they can express, the explicit ones. The problem there is that if we create products and services based upon what they can express, we are often way too late to the party. We're creating products and services that are behind the curve, things that they wanted but they don't want now. So one of the things that we have to learn how to do is how do we make explicit the implicit, meaning how do we turn into words these feelings, desires, needs, wants that are difficult for them to express. And the opportunity frontier is just a fancy term for that line between what they can express and what they can't express. Customers get 100% of the vote. What does that mean? Well, that means that it doesn't matter if your mother likes the product. It doesn't matter if your boss likes the product. The only thing that really matters is, does the customer like it? Does the customer like it enough to buy it? So the customer gets 100% of the votes. Bend over backwards, but don't break your back. Now, I'm sure you've heard of the concept of, you should bend over backwards and do everything you can for your customer, that the customer is always right. That you need to tailor a solution to meet customers' needs. Now, again, this is some language, but tailoring means to customize, just as a tailor customizes a suit or a dress for you. A solution is the product or service that you create that meets the needs of the customer, or solves the problem of the customer, or cures the pain of the customer. So tailoring a solution for customer needs means basically just making a product or service that they want. Okay? So Home Depot. Home Depot is the largest hardware store chain. It's like Bauhaus or Friedel's or something like that here in Sweden. And they were coming to open a new store in Manhattan, in New York City. And these guys were pretty smart. So what they decided to do was they did a survey and asked customers what sort of department did they want to have in this store. What sort of little area did they want to have in the store that was kind of highlighted? And they said they wanted a department that had things related to living in a space that was 25 yards, which is a little bit less than 25 meters. Now, why is this interesting? Well, because there are quite a few people in New York City that live in smaller apartments, 25 yards, let's say meters. So they wanted a special section that dealt with their issues. So Home Depot did that. They created a section that dealt with these issues. And you know what happened? It became popular. In fact, it was so popular that you had to make a reservation in order just to go into a section in a department store. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? Shrek. What is Shrek? I'm sure you all know what Shrek is. Shrek is the animated movie. Well, what is that all about? Well, it's simply this. Live action movies, okay, it usually takes about 10 live action movies for there to be one blockbuster. One blockbuster for about every 10 live action movies. And then there's one or two that do okay, and the most of them barely break even, and then the ones that lose a lot of money. And so the production companies make enough money on the blockbusters to pay for the other 9 films. However, with animated films, cartoons like Shrek, the success rate is much higher. In fact, think about how many animated films were flops. It would be hard for you to find many animated films that were a flop. Now, why is that? Why is that? Well, you might say, well, there are fewer animated films, there are fewer movies made for children, that animated films adults can go see as well. And there's some truth to that, absolutely. But the real reason is that when you go to a live action film, they've become smarter over the years, and sometimes they do a little bit of testing, usually about the end. In fact, I've been to one myself, where we went to a movie and saw them, and then at the end of the movie they turned on the lights and said, hey, can you fill out this survey about the movie? And we didn't know it when we watched it, and we only saw one movie, but they were testing 2 different endings. So sometimes they test, should the bad guy live or should the bad guy die at the end? But in animated film, they're testing all the way through. All the way through the development of the movie, they are testing with customers, with potential customers that look at a scene and say, we like it, we don't like it, and then they make adjustments. The producers make adjustments to the movie as it goes along. So by the time the movie comes out, it's been thoroughly tested by the customer and has been adjusted with all of that feedback in mind. So by the time the movie comes out, it's generally a success because it's been well tested. So again, they're tailoring the solution, the movie, to meet the needs of the customer. QVC. What is QVC? Well, QVC is it's these TV programs where they sell products. And QVC is the biggest one in the United States. They own the Home Shopping Network and whatnot. And it's set up like a morning news show where they have a host that then interviews different guests. Well, what happens is based upon what the guest says, the director gets feedback, because what happens is that people are calling to talk to the host, to talk about the product all the time, and asking certain questions. And so in a real-time way, they can judge what's going on the program. Do the customers like it or dislike it? So if the guest on the program says something that's interesting and calls start going up, the director then speaks in the ear of the host through the microphone and the earpiece and says, let's talk about this a little bit more. And so the director, on a real-time basis, based upon the real-time feedback of the customers, can adjust the program. Again, tailoring the solution to real-time needs. And finally here, worldwide wrestling entertainment. This is professional wrestling. That used to be taken more seriously than it is now, but it's an athletic play, an athletic ballet, where there's a good guy and a bad guy and a storyline. Well, what happens here is really fascinating, is that the referee has an earpiece. So let's say, for example, the bad guy is supposed to win. The bad guy is supposed to win. And he is about to win. But the crowd mood change, and they really don't like the bad guy tonight. So what happens is there's someone that working for WWE in the audience and makes the decision, let's change the script. And then he whispers into the ear of the referee, who then changes the action to allow the good guy to win. So on the service, of course, is the experience of watching the wrestling match. But based on the feedback, in the real-time feedback of the audience, the play can change. Just think if you had a product or service you were trying to sell your customer, and based upon real-time feedback, you were able to modify the product to meet their exact needs at that time. How successful could you be? How successful could you be? Let's take a quick break here, and I'll be back shortly. Okay, so we're still talking about ideation, still talking about the opportunity development process. Finding the border. Dance on the borderline between success and disaster, because that's where your next big breakthrough will come from. That's by one of the Alessi brothers. Alessi brothers have a design company and factory. And what they're saying is that there's basically a very thin line between success and failure. Either you can win really big or you can lose really big. And their success has come from the fact that they've been able to navigate this border and have really cool products in a new kind of design way that people hadn't thought about it before. And these things could have gone either way, but they've gone in the Alessi brothers' favor. Although this gray and borderline area is from where blockbuster products come from, each product developed for that area is potentially a high-risk project, because the analysis that leads the company to the decision is subjective and also based on gut feel. So the company has to be willing to accept risk as part of the process, and that's absolutely true. But what the Alessi brothers didn't really reveal too much here. But what they do is they design ceramic products. And they create all sorts of products, all sorts of designs, all sorts of styles. And they see which one actually works, meaning they see which one customers buy. And the ones that they don't buy, they remove from the market, and they push the ones that customers do. So basically, it's a process of just throwing everything up on the wall and seeing what sticks. And in that way, it's the customer that decides what works. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a high risk strategy in that it's either you win or you lose, kind of binary, but they don't know beforehand which one is going to win or which one is going to lose. But the interaction, again, this interaction with the customer is what tells them what's going to work. Focus groups. Now, I'm not sure how many of you know what focus groups are. I would guess that many of you do, but at the same time, many of you don't. What a focus group is, a company takes a group of customers, or they take a group of prospective customers, and they put them in a room. And then they have a facilitator there, and the facilitator's there asking questions about their needs and wants and desires, and if they like the product or they don't like the product that the company is selling. Now, smart companies do focus groups. Most companies don't do focus groups. Smart companies do focus groups to try to understand their customers better. The problem is, remember this implicit and explicit discussion we had just a little while ago? Is that when customers can express in words what they want, it's probably too late? Well, that's partly why focus groups suck, because people using them, companies using them, don't really know how to use them properly. They ask direct questions, and they expect direct answers, and they get direct answers from the customers, but these direct answers are only about the needs and wants and problems that the customers can articulate. They don't get to the latent and implicit ones. And as a result, when they create products and services based on these focus groups, oftentimes the products and services that they create are derivative, meaning they look like products and services that already exist, and they're latecomers to the marketplace, okay, because of that fact. So that doesn't mean that focus groups are bad. It's just that people don't use them properly. We have to try to figure out better ways in which we can either ask questions in a focus group in sort of an indirect sort of fashion, so we get the implicit and latent ones, because if we ask direct questions, it's going to be problematic, or we come up with a way entirely different than focus groups as a way to understand what people really want and what people really need. And as we talked about before, this opportunity frontier, which is this line around here, is basically this line between what the customer can actually say he or she wants and what the customer wants but can't really say. And we want to try to get as close to here as possible. Closest here as possible. Because if we can create products and services near this frontier, it's likely that by the time we create these products and services, customers may have the words at that particular time to really express their needs, and we'll have a product and service that matches those needs. And if we do it properly, we can be there before our competitors get there. So again, in summary, how can we understand what customers really want and need but have difficulty expressing in words? Well, what we have to do is we have to dig a little deeper. Now, in this little section here, natural versus unnatural, if you want to observe animals, two basic ways that we can observe animals. We can go to the zoo, okay, where animals are in an artificial setting, very similar to a focus group, and they're being observed. Now, anybody with a brain will realize that animals in a zoo, okay, just as people in a room, are not going to act as if they would in a natural setting. So another way is observing in a natural sort of setting. So how do we do that? Well, one way is establishing listening posts. And listening posts are a concept where companies establish a way, a method, a place where they can observe, watch, listen, hear customers acting as customers in real life. We can kind of observe the customer in the wild, one can say. And through observing their behavior, we can deduct what they really want, what they really need, what problems they actually are having. There's a hotel called Pier 5, and what Pier 5 did is that they gave customers in the morning these disposable cameras. And then in the evening, they'd pick up the disposable cameras from the customers, and they'd develop the pictures, and then they'd give the pictures back in the morning to the customers. Now, what they found is that customers took pictures of things they really liked, and they took pictures of things they really didn't like. And by observing the pictures, Pier 5, in the evening, they were able to really find out what the customers liked and what their customers didn't like, and they made adjustments based upon that learning. Very interesting. Eavesdropping on the market. I think we'll touch upon this a little later, so I won't mention much about it right now. But anthropologists and moles. Well, anthropologists are scientists that are behavioral specialists. Whether they're analyzing the behavior of animals or people, they're behavioral specialists. And so these days, many anthropologists are making lots of money selling their skills and services to companies. And the target of their study are customers and potential customers. And by understanding the behavior of the customers, they're able to advise the companies on the types of products and services that they should produce. A mole. What is a mole? A mole is a type of a spy. A type of a spy where he or she lives like the people that he or she is spying on, and they act as if they're one of them. For example, let's say you're in the bicycle business. So you have an employee that joins the local bicycle club and becomes a member of the bicycle club, an active member, and he is a member of the bicycle club. But as a member of the bicycle club, he gets to interact with the customer group and gets to hear and see and actually feel and experience some of the problems, pain, and needs that the bicyclists feel. And through that, and his ability to communicate that to the company, they're able to better understand the target market and better able to craft or create products and services that meet the needs of the bicyclists by having a deep undercover, quote-unquote, spy. Buying mode. It's important to try to observe the behavior of potential customers when they're buying, because the buying process is actually very complex, and people generally don't understand why they make the buying decisions they do. So if you do ask them direct questions, whether it's in a focus group in any other sort of way, they're going to give you an answer, but it might not be the truth. It's not that they're trying to trick you in any sort of way. It's just that people really don't understand the buying process and what drives them to buy this or that. But by observing, we might not be able to find the underlying reason that drives them, but we might understand better what they do, and then we can make our decisions in the terms of creating products and services based upon that. Are you reading your customer's mind? If you're not reading your customer's mind, your competitors certainly are. Okay? Your competitors certainly are. And what we're talking about by reading your customer's mind, we really want to try to understand the needs and wants that they have in an implicit sort of way when they're not going to be able to tell us? How are we going to find out? Well, Nordstrom's is a company similar to H&M in the U.S. And over 12 years ago, they did something very, very smart. They had a woman who was running their web shop. And what she did is she studied people's travel through the website. What pages did they go to? How did they move through the website? And they had an internal search engine. So if you were looking for, coats or swimsuits, you would put it in there, and that would take you to the particular page. So what she was doing was analyzing the real search terms that people were using in the site. Now, just think about what she was doing. Sophisticated companies are doing this today, but this was 12 years ago or more, and she was reading the customer's mind by analyzing how they were moving through the site, and by looking at the search terms they were searching for, she could determine what they were really interested in, and based upon that, they would stock the store or serve certain pages to them very, very early. Another company, this is in Minnesota, it's a store / psychological lab where companies would actually pay to use the lab. And you go into the store and it says you might be observed. But it looks like a regular store, and the products there are merchandised. And when you say merchandise, how they're set up, how they're on display, how are they presented to the customer. And you're able to put your product and merchandise your product in this store, and then through watching the video recordings or watching through two-way mirrors, you're able to observe the customer interact with your merchandise, with your product, and then determine, based upon how they actually interact with it and what they say, you can make changes, alterations, or modifications to your product and service. Another real smart way, again, observing people in buying mode, in buying behavior, in the wild. In the wild. Eavesdropping on the market. Let's start the next section talking about eavesdropping on the market. Okay, eavesdropping on the market. Eavesdropping on the market is about listening and hearing things that most people don't. Listening and hearing things that perhaps you weren't supposed to hear. It's about overhearing things. There is a simple way that you can increase the number of potential business opportunities you hear or see. As we said, that a business opportunity is an unmet market need. So we're trying to really understand what does a particular customer group need. But sometimes it's very difficult for us to think in terms of needs. So what we need to try to do is think in terms of problems. Why is that? Is that kind of funny? No, because people are really good at identifying problems. I think it has to do with genetics, in fact, fight or flight. We need to know if there's a problem. If there's a problem, we need to be able to run and get out of there. So we're really good at identifying problems. And the flip side of a problem is a solution, and the solution is the product or service that we're trying to create. On the other hand, if it's really a challenge for us to try to identify what's the need, what the problem is, we can think of terms of pain. What pain is a certain market segment having? What pain is a certain group of customers having? And so that's basically the need, problem, pain concept. If we think in terms of problems rather than needs, we will multiply the number of potential business opportunities we're able to uncover many, many fold. Just using that one simple idea. To eavesdrop on the market, you have to prepare yourself. But if you are prepared and you do listen, the market will tell you things. And we talked about before how to prepare ourselves. And one of the ways is to feed our brain with the information about the particular market group or to potential customers that we're interested in. We feed ourselves with those things, and we are aware of what's going on in our environment, okay, we will begin to start to see business opportunities. When we think in terms of a group of people, we understand that group of people, and we start thinking about what problems they're having, what pain are they having, what needs are they having, we will begin to see potential market opportunities. It's as simple as that. And I like to look at each of you as kind of healers of the pain, kind of doctors of opportunity, going through your daily life trying to solve the problems of a particular target group. Now, there's potentially some creativity that comes in here when you try to come up with some creative solutions to solve some of those problems that you've identified. We're going to talk about creativity shortly. But when you come up with products or services that solve problems, try to keep them simple. This is not to say that all problems have simple answers. Far from it. Some are very complex. But generally, simple solutions tend to be less expensive and more easily understood than complex solutions. So especially if we're starting out and we're new to entrepreneurship, we want to try, if we can, to pick the simplest solution. It's going to be easier for us, and it's going to be easier for us to communicate, because we're going to have to communicate it in terms of selling, in terms of getting partners, in terms of getting suppliers, in terms of getting investors, and ultimately in terms of getting customers. Okay, as I said, we were going to talk about creativity. So let's do this. Let's take a quick break here so we can start creativity nice and fresh. Okay, welcome back. Introduction to creativity. This is just a very brief lecture on creativity. Okay, we're going to have some exercises probably later on creativity, but this is just to give you a quick and dirty, let's say, overview of creativity, and it has a little bit different sort of perspective than perhaps you are expecting. So, creativity, we're going to cover in this section creativity. We're going to talk about paradigms for a second or two. We're going to talk about the use of creative problem solving, and then we're going to wrap up. That's impossible. Whenever you hear someone tell you that that's impossible, what the way you can translate that is that based on the paradigm we use today, we don't know how to do it. Remember what the Queen said, that she used to think on as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. In our discussion about impossible and how you limit your solutions if you only think about what you think is possible, and we have to take that limitation or that boundary away. Used a big word there, paradigm. So let's look at what that means. It's of a Greek origin, and it's a pattern or set of rules that define boundaries. For our purposes, what we need to know, it's the way that we look or accept things. It's kind of just the way things are. The way things are. And going back here, what's impossible is based on the way we do things today, we don't know how to do it. That's what they're really trying to say. Now, that doesn't mean that it's impossible. That doesn't mean that you can't do it. It does perhaps mean that they can't do it, because they are probably locked in the current way of doing things or the current paradigm. Let's give some examples of paradigm examples. This is a quick one that you should probably easily recognize. Selling your house. Okay, so the general way of selling your house, the current paradigm in selling your house, is you call a real estate agent. 1. 2, you need to keep your house spotless at all times. 3, you're going to give up a certain percentage of the selling price to the realtor or the real estate agent. Okay. In the United States, for example, it's 6%, which is relatively substantial. Now, in a new house selling paradigm, you sell it yourself. Okay. The extra cleaning the house, you only clean the house when you need to show it. And you don't have to give up anything. You get to keep it all. You get to keep it all. So it's just a different way of looking at how houses get sold. Now keep in mind, of course, the original paradigm of how houses were sold was just this. Is that you sold the house yourself, of course, because real estate agents didn't exist. You kept the house clean when you're going to show somebody the house, and you kept all the money. So we're kind of going back to an old paradigm. Okay, so hopefully you understand what paradigm means. So what's the definition of creativity? To be considered creative, a solution or idea must be new or unique and have some utility or value. In other words, perhaps solves a problem, perhaps. So new and have some utility or value. Relatively simple. Okay, or is it? Is it really simple to understand what is creative and what's not? I think it's not really that simple. But for our purposes, we're going to keep it real simple. Now, why are we talking about this? Well, having the ability to be creative, again, is another tool in your toolbox. The more tools you have in your toolbox, the better you're going to be able to solve problems. Increases your productivity. By being more creative, presumably you can increase your output. 3, it's less boring. You can have more fun. And 4, when you were young, we're going to get back to that in a second. But creative research, okay, will tell you that you're never more creative than you are today. That you'll continue to gain more knowledge. At the same time, you'll continue to lose your creativity. It seems like an interesting trade-off. We know more, but we become less creative. Why do you think that is the case? We're going to talk about that in a quick second. Again, there's a drastic drop-off in creativity occurs about after the 4th grade. Why? Because you're discouraged from inquiry. Kids, why? Why? We'll continue to ask why. They're curious, one, and they want to know why. They continue to ask why. But over time, people kind of get sick of that, and they're taught that they should just accept some things and not to continue to ask why. So they're discouraged from inquiry. Next, parents are not as patient. As I said, parents, when kids are young, will put up with a number of whys and whys. But after a while, parents say, that's just the way it is. Be quiet. And very close to that is the education system, which does very much the same thing. But also the education process tells you there's a right answer and there's a wrong answer. Basically a paradigm. This is the way we do it, and we don't do it the other way. This is right, this is wrong. This is black, this is white. And finally, there's peer pressure to conform. Meaning your peers, your friends, the people you hang out with, okay, one, you'll try to match your behavior and your views with them because you want to hang with them. And at the same time, that hanging with them will enforce a certain way of thinking on the group. So for those reasons, creativity continues to drop. The more you know, the less creative you get. Now, this was an interesting experiment. They took some architecture students. And when they were coming into architectural school, they said, hey, design a building. And they did. And then they put it away in a drawer somewhere. And then 4 or 5 years later, when the architectural students were about to graduate, they asked them to draw, create, design another building. And then they compared the two buildings, the ones they did when they were freshmen, the ones they did when they were seniors. And the seniors' buildings were much less creative than the brand new freshmen, or when they were brand new freshmen. And the reason is because the freshmen, when they were freshmen, they didn't know any better. But by the time they got to be seniors, they knew what the building codes were, they knew what the constraints of the materials were, they knew what customers' tastes were, they knew that this is how you're supposed to build a building, you're not supposed to do that. And so they learned more, but kind of the creativity got taught out of them, so to say. It narrows, the education narrowed their perspective, unfortunately. The good news is that creativity can be restored to a certain degree. The good thing also about this is that yes, your creativity goes down, but you know more, and so as you know more, and you're able to make better use of your dwindling creative juices, we can still do better in the future. So it's not the end of the world. You don't just give up after 4th grade. It's that we know more, and that knowing more does counterbalance our creativity loss. But that's just an aside. The second, let me just continue on this one point here. Secondly, as well, is that to be creative, okay, is how can we tap that childlike state? How do we tap that? And the people who are most creative are the ones that have figured out a way to tap their inner child, basically. That always questioning, very curious, always why person. Creative people are able to get into that mode quicker. And so they've developed a technique that works for them individually that allows them to get into that space really quickly. And so that's one of the things as an individual that you need to do. How can you get into that childlike space, into that child creativity sort of mind very quickly? And it's going to be a different way, a different approach for everyone. But there are some tools that can help exploit the creativity that you do have. Problem solving is actually one of creativity. Creativity and problem solving very, very closely linked. Here are 5 basic steps of problem solving. First, problem definition. What is the actual problem? Next step, gathering information. Third, generating alternatives or ideas. Fourth, then you try to evaluate and prioritize the alternatives or the ideas. And then developing a plan to implement the best ideas. We could add another couple of steps here. Is after implementation, there's a feedback, getting feedback on how the idea worked, and then implementing the changes after that. So we could add 2 more steps here. Here's just the 5 steps. Problem ID, info generation, idea generation, prioritizing, and implementing. Here are a couple of techniques that one can use to increase the number of alternatives, because the key part is here, generating the alternatives, generating the ideas. And the more ideas we have here, okay, the more creative we are going to be. So this interrogatory technique is one where we basically just make sure that we say why and who and where and when and how. And we make sure when we're thinking about the problem, we make sure that we hit each of these. Why, who, where, what, when, how. Now, it's very easy to say, of course, this is obvious, but many times we forget. So just make sure that this is one technique. It's called interrogatories. Example here, your boss asks you to come on and help on a problem. The reluctance of some employees to use computers for the job activities. And so, it's who exactly is reluctant. Why are they reluctant? When are they reluctant? How are they reluctant? Which tasks are they reluctant about? When you start asking those questions, you're drilling deeper into the problem to come up with exactly what the issue is, and that will lead to a better solution many times. As we said, who, where, what, when, how. Another is using metaphors, or not. Using metaphors, and this is an intuitive technique that uses analogies and metaphors, and applying them to a problem. Okay, and we can use lots of sports metaphors or natural metaphors and those sorts of things. For example, here, applying the baby bird technique to the previous problem of the reluctance of computer use, and basically it's comparing those folks that aren't using computers to baby birds, and the problems that baby birds basically are not very mature. They need a lot of help and a lot of guidance. And you compare the people who are kind of scared to use computers to baby birds, and what sort of things do parent birds do to help their baby birds live better. And then you say, okay, then maybe the supervisors of the employees can do the same sort of thing. Parent birds, reassure baby birds, and so maybe supervisors can reassure the employees and that sort of thing. But anyway, this is just a quick and small and perhaps not very good example, but you can come up with other ones that are much better, I'm sure. Brainstorming. Brainstorming is a technique that I'm sure you've heard of before, and it's a creative technique. And the basic thing about brainstorming is a separation from the idea generation from the critique. So we do all of the generation of new ideas and alternatives before we do any of the critique. And the idea is that if we do critique at the same time, people will be reluctant to continue to participate, that they'll shut down, they'll self-censor, and they won't be as generous with their ideas. And so if we separate those two, we'll get a maximum amount of ideas, and then we can focus on the evaluation or the critique of them. And this slide and the next slide just show you some of these techniques, some of these criteria to make sure the brainstorming works the best. For example, an optimal number of participants. Okay, that bosses and subordinates should not be in the same room, because if bosses are in the same room as subordinates, the subordinates will be less likely to speak, and also the bosses might be less likely to speak too, because they don't want to sound silly. The participants are trained. You tell them what to do and what to expect. That everything is recorded. You have a facilitator or a leader. Okay. It should be a long session. There should be some food. People should be relaxed. There should be rewards. And I'm sure you probably in life have been in some brainstorming sessions, and I doubt you've had a long session. I doubt you had rewards. I doubt you had food. But all of these things are part of the process in actuality. Okay. And again, the whole thing is to generate ideas and alternatives. Okay, and then once all of that is done, a final list is set, and then you move to the second phase, which is the critiquing phase. Now I know there's some of your questions there, and there's someone there to help you there, the coach and some other people, and look forward to hearing your questions. This was a great opportunity to share some of these ideas with you. This is just the beginning. We have a long way to go in ideation, a long way to go in understanding how to develop an idea into an opportunity, let alone how to develop the opportunity into a full-fledged business. Exercises. Here's a section I'm going to talk about some exercises. We've talked about lots of different things, but to really understand them, you need to get hands-on with them and do some actual exercises. So the exercises are going to be discussed in this particular section. Okay, I don't have them here yet, but this is where they're going to go. Okay.